Welcome to toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and this is part 2 of the restoration of this vintage Action Man helicopter. In part 1 we did lots of work on the tail section because that was broken and wouldn't even attach to the body, so that is now all back and attached. We added a replacement hook, and I just ordered a load of pieces that I was waiting to turn up, and they have now arrived, so we can get on with part 2. One of the pieces I was waiting for was a propeller blade, and that has now turned up. I had also ordered some polystyrene rod. This is a 6mm styrene rod, because the main part of today's video is going to be getting this landing gear repaired, because as you can see it's in a bit of a sorry state, and at the moment doesn't even fit on the vehicle. So we're going to do a lot of work on this so that it actually works and can be attached, and the helicopter can actually stand on the ground properly. So let's get straight on with this project. So here is the landing gear, and as you can see it's in a pretty sorry state. It's been very battered and broken, and that's just what happens with this sort of plastic over the years. It gets quite brittle and pieces of it snap off. We do have a few pieces for this. They're not the original pieces, but they will be good enough to get started. One original piece is this. This is one of the posts that attaches it to the bottom of the helicopter. That has just snapped off, and that's quite a neat snap. So I think plastic weld will do a good job of just reattaching that. Then we have these front prongs. These have snapped off, but these are not actually from this base. So you can tell the plastic is different, and where they've snapped, the sort of break point is different. So I'm going to have to sort of sand down that, and then join these two together. Because this is a sort of common area that it's going to break, plastic weld on that may not be strong enough. So my plan is to drill some holes in and insert pieces of Lego to add some strength to that. We have 2 of those, so I can attach those quite neatly. But yeah, Lego will be needed, because without that the chances of them snapping off again is pretty high. But we are missing the sections that come out of this end, which is why I bought some 6mm styrene rod. My plan is to make new pieces that will stick out the back. You can see here though there is a larger diameter section. The 6mm that I bought is the inner piece, but we need to make this sort of outer piece. And I was wondering how to do that, thinking, you know, can I actually strap styrene around this rod and get it to stick? I'd normally use 1mm styrene. It's not that flexible, so what I've done is I've actually bought some 0.5mm, so 0.5mm styrene sheet, which is this, and I've just done a quick test, and this stuff you can actually wrap around quite nicely. So we're going to do that so that we've got some sort of detail on the end of this rod. Overall though, a lot of bits to fix, a lot of holes to drill, because again this will need to be attached using pieces of Lego. Let's get constructing. The first piece I'm going to try and fix is just this broken off bit here. As I say, this actually did come from this landing gear. I can see that the join is exact, and you wouldn't get that with a brake like that. If it wasn't the same piece, the join would not be such a perfect match, and I reckon plastic weld will hold that. This plastic is the perfect sort of plastic to deal with plastic weld. It melts and fuses together to form a bond which is as sort of as strong as the original one supposedly. So we can try this. If it doesn't work, we will fix it a different way. So that's why we're doing this at the start, because it'll give it a nice long time to set and to cure. But I think that should work quite nicely. So I've got some EMA plastic weld here. This is the stuff I like to use. There are different brands, but this is the one that I find particularly good. So I'm going to get some of that out and put it on a paintbrush, and we'll start the plastic melting a little bit, and then we can fuse these 2 pieces together and use capillary action to sort of get the plastic weld to suck in a little bit more, and then it should fuse and make a really, really strong fix. So let's just try this. Yeah, I can feel that already starting to go. It sets so well. When plastic weld works, if you've got the right sort of plastic, the join it creates is so strong. I will just put a little bit more just around the edge of that, and we'll let that set, and then we can get on making the other pieces while this is sort of going off properly. But that join I think will be nice and strong. Yeah, that's looking good. So we're going to leave that, and we'll get on making the next pieces. So as you can see here, the rear parts of these skis are missing. We have the front portion, which is that section, which is sort of curved, but this missing part at the back we're going to be making out of this 6mm styrene rod. And this is my sort of prototype one that I made. I cut a length that is about the same sort of length between those two joints, because I thought that looked about right for sort of sticking out the back. And on this one, as I showed you, I've wrapped around a piece of a 0.5mm styrene. So I just cut off, again, a strip that's about the same width as these little bits, just to try and tie it all together. And stuck it on there just using plastic weld and sort of shaped it around and cut it to fit, and a bit of sanding. So I'm going to make another one of these. As I say, the length is arbitrary. I haven't really sort of got any good photos to show what the length should be, so I'm just sort of doing it by eye. So I've marked that piece there just with a pencil line. That's about the same distance between those two joints. And I'm going to cut that with this razor saw. So I've just marked it there, and I will just quickly cut that and then smooth off the ends just with a file. And this will give us the same length as my prototype, so I don't have to make another version. There we go. So that should be the same length as that. Now we can just wrap that 0.5mm sheet around the end, and it will look, yeah, I think by the time that's painted it will look pretty good. Out comes the plastic weld again, and I can now stick this strip on. I don't cut it to length, though I didn't on the first one. I just sort of did it by eye, because I wasn't quite sure how to actually work out the measurements for it to be the right length. So it's easy enough just to put a bit of plastic weld on, stick it on, roll it around, and then trim the end. As I sort of got to it, it seemed to work quite well. This 0.5mm styrene sheet is very flexible, so I didn't have any problems sort of bending it around. I did it in a few goes just to make sure everything had stuck properly. So how I did it was just stick one end on first, let that dry and set, and then once that's fully sort of attached, I could then roll it around and plastic weld my way around it as it had, you know, as I went, and that seemed to work really nicely. So I'll just let that set for a few minutes, and then we can roll it around. Okay, it's had time to set, so you can see I've started just to shape it around. We get some more plastic weld, and drop that in as we go, and then again roll it around. It's not looking too bad again. So I'll just sort of hold it like that for a second, then I'm going to get my knife and trim off the excess, and I'll join the two ends together. But that gives quite a nice sort of little detail at the end, and I think by the time that's on to the landing gear and painted, that'll give a nice end to the ski piece. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and attach it to the back of this landing gear or skis. To do that, I'm going to be using Lego. I'm going to be using these Lego antennas. These are particularly good for sort of adding extra support inside structures. These are about 3mm in diameter. They're very cheap to buy. So all you do is you've got to drill holes in everything. So I've already drilled a 3mm hole in the end of my prototype, and you can see that I've stuck a piece of that Lego in there. What we're going to do now is drill the same 3mm hole in there, and then we can insert it in and glue it in place. That gives that extra bit of strength and support, and then by the time we've painted everything up, you shouldn't notice that that has been attached. So I've got a 3mm drill bit in my drill, and I'm going to drill quite a few holes, and I've got lots of these Lego antennas and aerials. I've got them in different colours. These are just bits that I've cut off other ones, so I'm going to be using those just to clear out the scrap that I've got left rather than using the good ones. So yeah, let's drill a lot of holes and get these rear pieces attached. We can then use that exact same technique to attach these front ones with the curve. So I will tidy up the ends of these. You can see that one's not too bad and quite flat. This is not particularly flat, so I'll sand that down. But we can do the same. We'll drill holes and we'll attach them with Lego. That should make everything really nice and strong. So yeah, let's drill a few holes and see how this goes on. And there you go, that is starting to look like the landing gear should have looked originally. So we've got the long prongs at the back and we've got these curved ones at the front. These are currently not glued in place, so I can easily remove them. So there's the piece of Lego, and now is the time that I will glue everything, because I think that's about as good as it's going to get. So a little dab of glue on the end of each piece of Lego. I'll slot it in place, make sure it's all lined up, and we'll let that set, and then we can try it on the rest of the helicopter. Now for the really stressful part is whether this will actually fit onto the bottom of the helicopter without breaking. I'm going to be ever so careful when doing this, because this plastic is old and it's brittle, as you can see by the fact that it's already broken. So I'm just going to go very slowly and push these pieces in like so. That's fine so far. We'll turn this round. At this point you have to add a little bit of a sort of pressure to the plastic, because you've got to sort of bend it slightly, and that's the bit that I'm worried about. Get that one in, that one in. Okay, it's gone okay so far. Push those in. Oh, and there we go. It's in. There is the landing gear back on this helicopter. I think that's looking rather nice. Obviously not painted at the moment, but it's doing the job it should do. We now have landing gear again. So phew, that has all worked. All of the fixes I've done have seemed to have sort of held in place. And yeah, that's the landing gear back on. This helicopter is really starting to come together.
P-O-Y, P-O-L-L-O-I.
I'm now in a position where I can start painting all of these new pieces to make them blend in as close as I can with this original green plastic. For that I'm going to use a couple of different paints. I've got a Humbrol number 30, which is an acrylic, a green acrylic, which is a very good match actually for this sort of military green. I've added a tiny amount of black to that, which is just my Vallejo black, which is 70.950. I'm assuming that you can actually get this green in Vallejo colours. There's charts online all over the place to sort of show you conversions between different paint companies and different paint numbers for companies. So if you look up Humbrol 30, there'll be a chart that will tell you what the Vallejo equivalent is. So I've just mixed up a bit of that. I'm going to give everything a couple of coats of that. Once it's dry, I will then give it a clear coat with a sort of a clear lacquer that's going to be sort of a semi-gloss finish I want, because you can see that this plastic is quite shiny, so I want a sort of semi-gloss finish. Both the paints I'm using here are flat matte, so they will not match in. The sort of the sheen of them won't match at the end, but the colour will. So let's get the colour on, and then we can deal with the sort of shininess at the end. Once the paint had dried, I wasn't happy with the final sort of tone that it had got to. It was a little bit blue compared to this green, which is slightly yellowed with age. So what I did was I mixed the same sort of mixture again. So I used the 30 Humbrol green with a bit of black, but I also added a very tiny amount of this game colour, which is called gold yellow. It's 72.007, and that was enough just to get the same sort of yellowing that this plastic has here. And as you can see, that's now a really nice match. I'm very happy with how that's turned out. So the first green probably would work if the plastic hadn't sort of yellowed with age, but that little bit of yellowing changes the tone of it, and it meant that when you sort of looked at this standing back, you could clearly see that this was a different colour. So yeah, a little bit of yellow has sorted that out. I'm now going to go out into my garage and spray these new pieces with a clear top coat. I use Mr. Hobby satin finish spray, and that will mean that it sort of has this slight shine that you can see here. At the moment you can see that that is quite matte. So a quick go over with the Mr. Hobby top clear coat, and these will be done. While I'm waiting for the paint to dry, we can get on and deal with these propeller blades, which I showed you in the first video. One of them was missing an end piece, so you can see this top section here is missing. A little rubber bit on that end is also missing, and I've got one here which is very bent. You can see it's got quite a curve to it. It should be straight. So I went onto eBay and I managed to buy myself one other propeller blade. I think this cost £11, so a little bit expensive, but it should do the job. And I want to try and straighten this one. So I'm going to use the hot water trick. So I'm basically going to boil the kettle, dunk this in the just boiled water, and hopefully I should be able to sort of bend this straight again. You can see there's already some stress marks on it, but I think it should work. If it doesn't, I have this one as a backup and I can just swap out the end piece. But we'll try the hot water trick and see what happens. This sort of plastic, I'm hoping, does work. Sometimes the harder plastics like this don't like to sort of soften and bend out sort of back to flat, but we'll give it a go and just yeah, see what happens. The hot water worked a treat. As you can see, that's straightened up really nicely, and it's actually even removed some of those sort of mild stress marks on the top. So I'm very happy with how that's turned out. I've now got 3 good propeller blades and I didn't have to do any work changing that end piece. I will keep this one for future though, because you never know, I might get another one in and need a blade for it or need some parts, so that's a useful piece to keep. But I have these 3 blades. We can now attach them to the helicopter, but we need to work out a way of doing that, because the original way it was done was with elastic bands, and I think we can do it a simpler way using some O-rings. So originally the helicopter blades were held onto the top section just using elastic bands. The toy came with some elastic bands that wrapped around that section. Because this piece is actually loose, it sort of feels like it's broken, but it's supposed to be loose. And what happens is you clip the blade in like that, and then the elastic band sort of holds that piece together. Without it, the blades just fall out. So rather than using elastic bands, my plan is to use O-rings. I have this box of O-rings that I use for all sorts of projects, and I've had a quick look through there, and there's plenty of sizes that will work. So I've got one O-ring here. You have to put one O-ring on each of these little sockets. So I'm going to stick that over there like that, and then hopefully that when I put the blade in, it will hold it in place, because there's now a little bit of sort of sprung tension on the end of this. So let's just clip that in place. Yeah, and that holds in quite nicely. So if I can get another O-ring, we'll slot it over that one. I'll put another blade in. the more we add in, the more this should hold in place. Yeah, that's holding in quite nicely, and you can still remove the blade. So rather than using an elastic band, an O-ring will do the job. I had thought we could actually use sort of tiny cable ties, but with cable ties you sort of tie them on, then it would be awkward to get the blades out. With O-rings we can easily replace those. So now I can actually put the whole of this helicopter back together. Everything is fixed and everything is dry, so yeah, let's put it back together and see what it should look like. And so here we go. Here is the finished helicopter. It's all back together, everything is working, and it is a really very nice displayable piece. I'm going to have to say it is for display only because the plastic on this is so brittle. I think if you were to play with it for any length of time, all the bits that I had fixed would break, and even more because the plastic on that rear tail is very delicate, and yeah, just sort of touching it and bending it you can feel it creaking, and I think yeah, it would snap very easily. But as far as the display piece goes, this is really looking lovely. Everything works in it. I'm very happy with the repairs that I managed to do. I think I got the paint match on the skis really pretty close. You would be hard pushed to even notice that. The rear tail fixes as well look really nice. Again, once those are painted up you wouldn't even notice that that has been repaired, and it holds together very nicely. And also the propellers now do work as well. They are locked in place using those O-rings, and as you can see by pressing the button the blades spin really nicely and really freely. So from a pile of junk I've ended up with a very nice displayable Action Man helicopter. It's been a lot of work because we've had to make a lot of things from scratch, but it was really worth doing because as you can see it looks lovely. So I need to say a massive thank you to Darren the toy boy for sending in the sort of the parts for this. It's been a fun project and really enjoyable to do, so thanks Darren. If you've enjoyed this video then check out some of my other Action Man projects. I've done loads over the years covering all sorts of different issues. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.